They called me Legacy Load. That's what the new guy labeled me before, even shaking my hand. I was halfway through updating a federal compliance spreadsheet when the conference feed flickered alive, and there he was. Mark Ellis. 30, maybe 31, with the kind of confidence that only comes from PowerPoint and pre-workout. The CFO introduced him like a savior descending from the cloud. Our new efficiency strategist. Corporate code for executioner with a LinkedIn smile. His hair looked precision cut by someone who charged per strand. His shirt probably cost more than my office chair. Hi everyone, he grinned, voice dripping with that smooth condescension people mistake for charisma. I'm here to modernize workflows and remove outdated redundancies. His eyes scanned the room and landed on me. Like a buyer inspecting a car he planned to scrap for parts. I didn't flinch. I simply clicked save as on a hidden folder titled Sunday Recipes, which was actually my private archive of every company license, audit timestamp, and renewal log tied to my credentials. 10 years of compliance work disguised behind pancakes. Because Dana Morgan wasn't going down as anybody's easy casualty. By lunchtime, Mark was in the break room cracking jokes about phasing out the dinosaurs. I'm 43, not a fossil, but in his world, if you don't manage your workflow through memes and apps, you're obsolete. Then came the alignment meeting. Open floor plan. Everyone standing like we were about to witness a ritual sacrifice of logic. Mark clicked through a slide deck filled with buzzwords, adaptive accountability frameworks, and modular synergy cycles. 3 interns nodded like he'd just revealed the secrets of the universe. Some of our long-standing contributors will be reassessed, he said, eyes on me, to ensure alignment with our new lean structure. Reassessed. Translation. Hunted. He smiled. We deeply appreciate your historical value, Dana. Historical. Like I was some artifact to be dusted off for Nostalgia Week. I smiled back, the kind of smile you give before the storm starts. Because what he didn't know is that beneath all his shiny jargon and MBA sparkle, I'd already built the one system he couldn't touch. And if he ever tried to erase me, he'd learn exactly how dangerous legacy could be. He came to streamline the company. I came to remind him what happens when you cut the wrong wire. That night, the office was almost silent. Just the hum of old computers and the faint echo of ambition dying under fluorescent lights. I stayed late, not because I had to, but because I wanted to listen. Every machine, every audit file, every digital heartbeat in that network had my fingerprint on it. It was my orchestra, and I knew the rhythm better than anyone. As I double-checked the federal dashboards, my credentials still pulsed green across every regulatory portal. Active. Untouched. Bound legally to my name. Then I opened my contract. Page 14, Section 9B, something I'd slipped in years ago when legal was too lazy to read the fine print. In the event of involuntary termination, all regulatory certifications and compliance licenses issued under employee authority shall be rendered null within 48 hours of contract dissolution. In short, if they fired me, the company lost its license to breathe. I printed that page, folded it twice, and tucked it into my drawer beside an old ID badge and a stale pack of gum. My safety net, disguised as trash. The next morning, Mark was in early. He'd plastered a poster above the copier that read, "Compliance is not equal to complacency." In Comic Sans. That should have been a crime on its own. Then came his grand idea. Everyone, and I mean everyone, would have to reapply for their existing positions. He called it a growth opportunity. I called it a firing line. One by one, the staff shuffled into conference rooms like school kids sent to detention. The new hires came out smiling, full of hope and buzzwords. Mark really sees potential in us, one whispered. Yeah, he saw potential all right in their salaries. When my turn came, I didn't bring a resume. I brought silence. He didn't look up from his laptop. Dana, you've been here, what, 10 years? 12, I said, calm as glass. Right, he nodded, typing something, probably my obituary in spreadsheet form. We value experience, but we're restructuring toward a more agile ecosystem. He pulled up an org chart. My role, regulatory stewardship, had a bright red cross over it. Beside it, one note, to be reassigned. I caught a glimpse of another file tab on his screen labeled Q2 License Delegation, Draft. A comment under it read, "Can this be shifted downstream?"
Downstream.
In corporate language, that means dump it on the intern. I smiled. Not because I found it funny, but because I knew the moment you start calling knowledge redundancy, you've already lit your own fuse. He thought I was harmless paperwork. He didn't realize paperwork can burn an empire down. When I returned to my desk, I didn't panic. I documented. The database I'd built back in 2016, my baby, sat quietly on my screen. It wasn't flashy, no modern dashboard with pastel graphs and buzzword filters. It was functional, meticulous, and airtight. 47 licenses. 47 government-issued authorizations. 47 red strings, all tied neatly to my name. Every single one had an expiration date, a regulatory body, and a signature authority line that only I could access. You couldn't even sneeze near those forms without tripping 3 levels of security. Mark thought I was just some middle-aged spreadsheet gremlin. He had no idea he was standing on a minefield that spelled Dana Morgan. So I exported a clean copy of that database, encrypted it, renamed it Employee Birthday Cake List, emailed it to my private cloud, then deleted the sent mail, emptied the trash, and smiled. I wasn't paranoid, just experienced. I've seen too many hotshots think innovation means tossing gasoline on the paperwork and calling it digital transformation. By 3 p.m., I got an email notification. Access privileges reassigned. My inspection prep files had been transferred to a marketing intern named Chloe, who once asked if FDA stood for Food Design Aesthetics. Bless her heart. Meanwhile, I'd been temporarily reassigned to reorganize the janitorial supply shelf. According to Mark, it would keep me involved at a foundational level. Foundational, like mold. I smiled, asked politely, "Do I still have administrative access to the licensing portal?" He blinked, confused. "Oh, I think we rerouted that to Chloe last week. You don't need it anymore, right?" "Sure, Mark. I definitely didn't need the single system keeping your company legal." After he strutted away, I walked down to an unused terminal in the records room, one the IT team had forgotten even existed. Logged in using my old root credentials. And from there, I quietly revoked Chloe's access before she could accidentally delete a federal license thinking it was a PDF form. They could strip my title, move my desk, change my tasks, but they couldn't erase my shadow. Because I was still the system admin they didn't know existed. That's the thing about power. It doesn't always make noise. Sometimes, it just watches from the dark, waiting for someone stupid enough to pull the wrong wire. He just cut me out of the system. What he didn't know was I built the system's heartbeat. The first sign came on Wednesday morning. I tried logging into the compliance dashboard, my dashboard, and the screen flashed red, error 403, access denied. Cute. The same dashboard that existed because I'd spent 6 years building it from the ground up, now locked me out like I was a stranger trying to break into my own house. At first, I thought it was a system glitch. Then came the second denial. Then a third. By noon, 3 of my internal dashboards were inaccessible. 2 of them I had personally coded. No notice. No permissions request. Just corporate silence. I called IT. No one picked up. I emailed HR. Auto reply. When I finally got through to a human being, she said the same thing I'd been dreading to hear. All requests now go through your departmental manager. Translation: talk to Mark. Mark. The same man who thought agile compliance ecosystems meant throwing all your files into Google Drive. When I finally reached him, he smiled like we were sharing a joke. "Oh, don't worry about those systems, Dana. We're just migrating to a newer process." Migrating. Another corporate word for burying everything you built while calling it innovation. I didn't argue. I just nodded. But inside, I was already moving pieces. That evening, I walked down to the old records wing, a forgotten corner of the building where dust had tenure. In a locked cabinet, behind a stack of outdated HR binders, sat the paper copies of my license authorizations. Stamped. Signed. Every one of them with my name printed in black ink. No digital migration could rewrite those. So, I made an appointment for the next day at a notary office above a nail salon. The form was titled Voluntary Relinquishment of Regulatory Authority. I didn't sign it. Not yet. But I notarized the option. Because in this game, you don't need to pull the trigger right away, you just make sure it's loaded. When I left, the wind outside felt colder. Not because the temperature had changed, but because I knew the company's heartbeat was about to skip. Mark wanted efficiency. He was about to experience silence, the kind that costs millions. He thought cutting my access would end me. He didn't realize I'd already built his exit strategy. He just hadn't read the fine print yet. It happened on a Monday.
Of course it did.
Mondays are when bad decisions wear suits. The office felt different that morning, quiet but charged, like static before a lightning strike. The air conditioner hummed too loudly, keyboards clicked too nervously. Everyone pretended to be busy, but their eyes kept flicking toward the conference area. Mark stood front and center in his spotless navy blazer, holding a cup of overpriced coffee like it was a microphone. His PowerPoint was open on the big screen, glowing with the title, Momentum Sync. I could already smell the disaster. Let's start with some candor, he said, raising both palms like a politician soothing a riot. That word, candor, is the corporate code for brace yourself. He paced the open floor like a TED Talk host with a god complex. We've been evaluating our structural alignment, he continued, smiling like a dentist about to deliver bad news. While we value tradition, stagnation can't stand in the way of progress. He stopped behind me. I didn't turn around. And unfortunately, he said louder, some legacy roles are no longer compatible with our forward momentum. The room froze. You could hear the air conditioner wheeze. Effective immediately, he announced, Dana Morgan's position has been phased out. Just like that. No meeting. No warning. No pretense of humanity. I stood, not because I was shaken, but because I was too steady for how much rage I felt. HR appeared like stage props, holding a glossy folder that probably still smelled like printer ink. We appreciate your contributions, one mumbled, eyes down. I opened the folder, flipped to the last page, and saw the line they wanted me to sign. No severance. No apology. Just a dotted line and a cheap pen. I signed it in one stroke. Then I looked at Mark and said evenly, I'll need a printed copy. He blinked. It's all digital. I smiled. Print it. 4 minutes later, I walked out with a stapled receipt and the quiet satisfaction of a woman who knew exactly what that signature had just done. Because buried inside that contract lay Section 9B, the silent clause I'd planted years ago. The moment my termination was processed, every company-paid certification tied to my name would self-nullify within 48 hours. They hadn't just fired me. They'd unplugged their own oxygen. By the time they realized what I'd done, the clock was already ticking, and every breath they took was borrowed from me. By 7:13 that evening, my email pinged. A bland, automated notice from the National Compliance Registry. Your certification authority #C 8829 through #M 5012 has been formally rescinded in accordance with Clause 9B. All dependent entities will be marked non-compliant within 24 hours unless reauthorized by a certified successor. No fireworks. No alarms. Just one sterile paragraph. But that single email was the quiet sound of a guillotine falling.
I didn't screenshot it. Didn't forward it.
Just poured a glass of red wine, opened a bag of chips, and let the reality settle in. By morning, procurement tried confirming a medical shipment. Denied. License inactive. Then came operations. Database access failed. Then legal. Error codes they'd never seen before. At 9:47 a.m., someone in IT finally shouted across the floor, "Why are all our regulatory keys showing expired?" The panic spread like a cold front. The one-screen dashboard that used to gleam like a Christmas tree of compliance now flashed solid red. Inactive. Invalid. Orphaned. And where was Mark? Strolling into the chaos with a latte in hand, saying, "We'll just update the contact info." Bless his MBA soul. Renee, one of the analysts, tried explaining that contact updates require reauthorization from the certifying officer. In this case, me. Mark blinked. So, do it anyway. Renee hesitated. Sir, Dana was the only credentialed officer with universal clearance across all divisions. No one else is registered with the Federal Compliance Board. Re-registration takes weeks. Silence. Not the awkward kind, the fatal kind. You could feel the air drop 10 degrees as the reality sank in. They'd fired the only person legally allowed to keep them operational. Across town, I was eating leftover pasta in my pajamas, watching reruns of Golden Girls. My phone buzzed, anonymous email chain. Subject: What did you do? Attached was a screenshot from Mark's Slack message to the legal team. Does anyone know how to override a license expiry tag in the compliance dashboard thingy? Thingy. That word alone made me laugh hard enough to choke on a noodle. The system he was trying to brute force into submission was the same one I designed to lock out intruders and auto-report tampering to federal audit logs. He wasn't overriding it. He was tripping alarms in 3 different agencies, while still thinking it was an IT bug. He called it a glitch. I called it gravity because everything he built was about to fall exactly the way I planned. Friday morning didn't arrive with thunder. It arrived with an email. Subject: Randomized FDA site inspection, 10 a.m. Random, yes. But only within the window I'd carefully programmed 3 years ago when I was still the relic. The window designed to ensure the inspection would fall exactly when their compliance chain was weakest, if anyone ever tampered with it. It was poetic. By 9:20, the front desk called compliance. There are 3 inspectors here asking for the certifying officer. Silence. Because there wasn't one anymore. Mark, now visibly sweating through his executive-cut blazer, sprinted from his glass office like someone had just yelled fire. He reached the operations wing and barked, "Get Dana's credentials reinstated." A junior associate, bless his panicked soul, began Googling how to reinstate federal compliance license fast, like it was a how-to guide for baking banana bread. Another analyst muttered, "Sir, reinstatement requires full recertification, average turnaround, 4 to 6 weeks. Mark froze. 4 to 6 weeks of being legally paralyzed. The inspectors waited at the lobby, clipboards in hand, patients, wearing thinner than the company's stock options. Mark tried logging into the National Credentialing Portal using my old ID. Access denied. He tried resetting the password. User not found. Then he called the regulatory board. The line transferred him 3 times before a calm operator said, "Ms. Morgan voluntarily relinquished her licensing authority. Her profile has been removed from the active registry. Reinstatement will require a full reapplication process." Mark just stood there, phone still pressed to his ear, staring into the abyss of his own stupidity. Meanwhile, I was across town sipping my coffee, dark roast, no sugar, extra smug, watching the news ticker scroll. Regional biotech firms face compliance blackout following staff restructuring. I didn't need to see their faces to imagine the chaos. The phone calls, the shouting, the frantic meetings where nobody knew who was authorized to even open the digital doors. That morning, 3 vendors suspended shipments, 1 client froze payment, and the audit team refused entry. Every domino fell exactly where I'd placed it. And me? I painted my nails a color called Power Outage. Because revenge didn't always roar. Sometimes, it just smiled behind a coffee cup while the system you built ate its creator alive. By noon, the building was on fire, metaphorically. By Monday, someone would be there to pour gasoline. Monday, 8:37 a.m. The building smelled like burnt coffee and panic. That's when he arrived, Gregory T. Winslow, CEO, professional yacht enthusiast, and self-proclaimed visionary. Tan, still fresh from whichever coastal resort he'd been strategizing at, linen shirt unbuttoned just low enough to scream midlife confidence and tax deductions. He strutted through the glass atrium like Caesar returning from war, except this empire was already burning. "Morning, folks," he said, throwing finger guns at the interns. "Hope y'all didn't burn the place down while I was gone." No one laughed. By the time he hit the executive floor, 3 urgent emails were waiting in his inbox. Subject: Compliance authority revoked. Subject: audit failure. Immediate action required. Subject: licenses expired. Legal exposure. His smile cracked. At 9:02, he stormed into the operations room, expecting turbulence. Instead, he walked into a full-blown plane crash. The dashboards red. The phones ringing off the hook. The vendors threatening lawsuits. The audit suspended indefinitely. Revenue frozen. Gregory turned toward the room full of sleepless managers, his jaw tightening. Who's handling this? Every head turned toward Mark. Mark looked smaller now. Gone was the confident smirk, replaced by the pale sweat of a man realizing his degree didn't prepare him for actual consequences. Gregory slammed a folder on the table. My termination file. He scrolled silently through the digital copy projected on the big screen. Clause by clause. Line by line. Until he stopped. You fired the license holder, he said.
Not shouted, said. Quietly. Slowly.
Mark opened his mouth, closed it, then stammered. Her role was redundant. Gregory's voice dropped to a growl. You fired the only federally credentialed officer with cross-departmental clearance.
Silence.
He flipped another page. Her signature is on every active license, every renewal, every compliance certificate that keeps this company legal. He turned the monitor for everyone to see. See this? Section 9B. You know what that means? It means this company is now in full federal suspension because some PowerPoint prophet wanted to look efficient. Mark's voice cracked. We thought we could reassign it. It's a federal license, not a damn Outlook contact list. Gregory barked. Nobody spoke after that. The sound of the air conditioning filled the room like a confession. Somewhere across town, I took another slow sip of my coffee. Because when you build something from the ground up, you always know exactly how to make it collapse. The CEO finally knew who'd really been holding the power all along, but by the time he tried to reach me, I'd already moved on to phase 2. By noon, Gregory's phone had 6 missed calls, 3 panicked voicemails, and 1 message from legal that began with the words, catastrophic exposure. Every department was screaming for the same thing, Dana Morgan. Marketing couldn't release campaigns because the compliance taglines weren't certified. Operations couldn't move shipments because the vendors refused to deal with an unlicensed entity. Legal couldn't issue a statement without tripping over federal non-compliance codes. The man who'd spent a decade building an empire of buzzwords was now watching it dissolve one revoked signature at a time. By 3 p.m., Gregory called HR. Find her, he ordered. The HR rep stammered. She's, unresponsive, sir. Unresponsive. Like I was a hospital patient instead of the woman holding their life support plug. Gregory exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. Then get her to respond. Pay her. Beg her. I don't care what it takes. Hours later, a new email landed in my inbox. Subject: Return request by CEO directive. The tone was corporate desperation disguised as humility. Dana, we recognize the critical nature of your previous contributions. Please consider returning to assist in restoring operational integrity. We are prepared to be flexible regarding compensation. Let's rebuild together. Greg Winslow. I read it twice. No apology. No accountability. Just fear wrapped in HR language. So, I drafted my reply. Subject: Return request by CEO directive. Gregory, I appreciate the offer. Unfortunately, I don't return to burning buildings, especially the ones that threw me into the fire for efficiency's sake. Attached, a highlighted copy of my signed termination clause, formal revocation confirmation from the compliance board, and a current screenshot of your certification dashboard. You'll notice my name's still listed, grayed out, irreplaceable. Wishing you compliance and clarity, Dana Morgan. I clicked send and leaned back in my chair. No gloating. No speech. Just the quiet exhale of someone closing a door from the outside. The kind of door you know no one inside will ever open again. At headquarters, Gregory stared at the email like it was a death certificate. He didn't forward it.
Didn't reply.
He just sat there, realizing they hadn't fired an employee. They'd excommunicated the architect. They wanted me back to rebuild their empire, but I'd already designed a better one. And this time, it had my name on the door. 3 weeks later, LinkedIn nearly imploded.
There it was, my post.
Simple, minimal, surgical. Dana Morgan, Director of Compliance Strategy, Stratex Biocore. No hashtags. No grand speech. Just one line. Grateful to join a team where integrity isn't an afterthought. That was it. No need for fireworks. Because sometimes silence is louder than the truth itself. Below that post were 2 small updates from the business world. Stratex Biocore secures OmegaMed and Viarc contracts, citing unbroken compliance confidence as a deciding factor. Those names probably meant nothing to most people scrolling through their feeds. But inside Gregory Winslow's office, those names were gold bars. The 2 crown jewel clients his company had paraded in every earnings call, every investor deck, every board meeting. And now they were mine. See, Stratex didn't hire me because they needed a compliance director. They hired me because they needed the person who'd already written the manual everyone else was breaking. Within days, they handed me a glass office, a private espresso machine, and a team that didn't use words like synergy without flinching. Meanwhile, across town, the old place was drowning in red tape. Licenses still suspended. Audits piling up. Fines accumulating like dust in an empty conference room. Vendors were jumping ship faster than HR could issue exit memos. Clients were ghosting them mid-contract. And Mark, let's just say his job title changed from efficiency strategist to consultant, transitional projects. Corporate translation. He'd been demoted so hard the elevator skipped floors. His shiny standing desk was replaced with a wobbly chair, his Slack permissions revoked, and his new task list reading. Document archival support. Efficiency achieved. And Gregory? He tried one last time, through a legal intermediary this time, to reopen discussions. The offer came wrapped in gold wording and corporate perfume, consulting pay, flexible hours, full non-disclosure agreement. I declined.
Politely.
Because I didn't need to return to rebuild what they'd burned. I'd already built something better. My name wasn't a faded entry on a dashboard anymore. It was on the door, printed in silver letters under soft lighting. And every morning, when I sat down with my coffee and watched the alerts roll in from industry boards, I smiled. Because the company that called me Legacy Load was now a ghost in the system I'd outgrown. They erased me from their history, but I became the future they couldn't survive without. By the time winter hit, Gregory's empire was little more than an inbox full of red alerts. Every morning, new compliance failures pinged the system like heart monitors in cardiac arrest. License status, pending audit. Renewal authorization, denied. Federal appeal, rejected. And each time I saw them. Not because I cared, but because I still had quiet eyes in the system. A few loyal colleagues who'd seen the writing on the wall and whispered updates like survivors sending messages from a sinking ship. Procurement just halted again. FDA portal rejected their file. Legal fines hit 6 figures this week. I'd reply with the same 2 words every time. Not surprised. They had mocked me for being too meticulous, for labeling every file, timestamping every log, and cross-referencing every license like it was sacred scripture. Now those habits were the exact map showing how deep their grave was. Meanwhile, my new office hummed with quiet success. No panic. No politics. Just systems that worked because people here valued structure over slogans. When the quarterly reports came out, Stratex Biocore was trending up. Their headline? Cleanest compliance record in the sector. Across the city, Winslow Industries' name appeared under a different headline. Major biotech firms face full regulatory suspension amid internal mismanagement. Mark's photo was attached to the article, wide-eyed, tired, and unshaven. The caption read, "Former operations director declines comment." I almost felt bad. Almost. Gregory, on the other hand, wasn't so quiet. He issued a statement that read like a bedtime story for investors. We are undergoing a restructuring period to ensure alignment with future integrity initiatives. Integrity. The same word they weaponized when they fired me. One of my old coworkers, Liz, sent me a text later that night. You should have seen his face in the board meeting. He looked like a man reading his own obituary. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because the truth was simple. They thought removing me would make them faster. Instead, it made them hollow. And hollow things don't crumble. They collapse silently from the inside. They called it restructuring. I called it karma, written in fine print and signed in permanent ink. It arrived on a Thursday morning. Quiet, unassuming, polite. Subject: private inquiry from the office of Gregory Winslow. I almost deleted it. But curiosity, that old familiar spark, made me open it. Dana, I know we've made mistakes. The past few months have been challenging for everyone involved. I won't insult you with excuses. Only honesty. We need your help. Not as an employee, not even as a consultant, just as someone who understands this infrastructure better than anyone. Whatever you want, we'll make it happen. Gregory. For a man who'd once strutted through glass corridors calling himself the future, this was an impressive act of humility. Too bad it came 3 months too late. I stared at the message for a long while, not out of anger, but memory. The sound of him laughing with Mark as they streamlined my job. The way HR's eyes avoided mine when they handed me that glossy folder. The silence after they fired the only person keeping their house standing. And then, I wrote my final reply. Gregory, you don't need my help. You need accountability. When you chose efficiency over experience, you didn't just fire an employee, you deleted your company's spine. I spent a decade building a system that protected you from chaos. You tore it down to impress shareholders who can't spell compliance. I warned you once that legacy isn't dead weight. It's the foundation you stand on. Best of luck rebuilding. Dana Morgan. I hovered over the send button for a moment. Then I clicked it. Not out of spite, but finality. Some victories don't come with applause. They come with silence, the kind that tastes like peace. That night, I walked home under the city lights, hands in my coat pockets, air crisp with the smell of rain and redemption. Behind me, a company collapsed under its own arrogance. Ahead of me, a new skyline was being built, one where my name was etched into the blueprint. No fireworks, no revenge speech, just balance restored. Sometimes the best revenge isn't ruining someone else's life. It's building one they can never touch. He'd finally said sorry, but by then, I'd stopped speaking the language of regret. I'd moved on to something stronger. Legacy. People think revenge ends with destruction. They're wrong. It ends with understanding. With the quiet realization that you were never the villain, just the lesson they refused to learn. I used to hate that word, legacy. The first time Mark called me legacy load, it sounded like an insult, a label for something outdated, slow, unnecessary. But sitting in my new office months later, sunlight pouring through glass walls that were finally mine, I understood what it truly meant. Legacy isn't about age. It's about endurance. It's the systems that keep working when the buzzwords fade. It's the integrity that stays steady when everyone else is sprinting for recognition. It's the name people whisper when they realize the structure they depend on was built by hands they discarded. I watched Stratex flourish under consistency. No drama. No chaos. Just competence. Funny how revolutionary that can feel after years of agile reinvention. Every morning, I passed a blue sticky note pinned to the edge of my monitor. 5 words written in bold block letters. In case they ever forget, it wasn't bitter. It was a reminder, because memory fades, and history has a way of favoring the loudest liar in the room. But I refuse to let my story be rewritten by the people who once erased me. Sometimes, when I looked out over the city skyline, I thought about the people still trapped in those glass towers, working for men like Mark, who confuse leadership with volume and innovation with recklessness. I didn't pity them. I just hoped they were watching. Because every empire falls the same way, not through sabotage, not through rebellion, but through arrogance. Gregory and Mark didn't lose because of me. They lost because they believed no one beneath them mattered. Legacy, in the end, is built by those who stay when the spotlight moves on. The quiet ones. The builders. The people who double-check the locks before someone burns down the house. And maybe that's what revenge really is, not fire, Not fury, but foundation. The proof that you were always the one holding the structure steady. They called me obsolete once. But the truth is, I was the blueprint. And they were just tenants passing through my design. It started with a phone call. Not from Stratex, not from Gregory's collapsing firm, but from the National Compliance Council. A woman with a calm, clipped accent introduced herself. Ms. Morgan, we'd like to formally invite you to speak at our annual governance symposium. The topic is resilience in corporate infrastructure. Resilience. I almost laughed. They wanted the woman once labeled legacy load to teach a room full of executives how to survive innovation. Poetic, really? I accepted, of course. Not for fame, but for the irony. The day of the symposium, the conference hall buzzed with the sound of ambition in designer shoes. Rows of sharp suits, bright screens, and restless egos waiting to be inspired. I stepped onto the stage. No flashy slides, no rehearsed smile. Just me, a microphone, and 10 years of scars polished into wisdom. I was once told my methods were outdated. I began. A few chuckles from the younger crowd. Predictable. But when the systems built on speed collapsed, the only thing that held was what they called old. The room quieted. Efficiency, without accountability, isn't progress. It's negligence disguised as movement. And legacy isn't resistance to change. It's the framework that makes change possible. Silence. The kind that means someone's finally listening. Afterward, people lined up to shake my hand, executives, auditors, analysts. Every one of them said the same thing. I wish we had someone like you. That evening, back at Stratex, I found a small plaque waiting on my desk. Brushed steel, engraved with 6 words. Dana Morgan, Director of Integrity Systems. It wasn't just a title.
It was a statement.
For years, I'd watched men like Mark get promoted for making noise while people like me kept the world from falling apart quietly. Now, my name was literally on the door, and it didn't feel like revenge anymore.
It felt like balance.
I didn't need headlines. I didn't need applause. All I needed was the knowledge that somewhere out there, Gregory was sitting in another boardroom, staring at my name in an industry report, realizing his empire fell because he underestimated a woman who refused to break. Once, they taught me silence was survival. Now, my silence was the sound of respect echoing through every boardroom that used to laugh at my name. The email arrived late on a Sunday night. No subject line. Just a single name I hadn't seen in years. Chloe Parker. Yes, that Chloe. The marketing intern who once thought FDA stood for food design aesthetics. I almost didn't open it, but something told me to read. Ms. Morgan, you probably don't remember me. I was the intern assigned to your files during the restructuring. I wanted to say, thank you. I didn't understand it then. Why you documented everything, why you were so meticulous, or why you didn't argue when they sidelined you. But now I do. I work at a startup managing our compliance systems, and last week we passed our first audit. Perfectly. I built the workflow using one of your old spreadsheets I saved from the shared drive. It still had your initials in the corner. It worked. You taught me, without ever saying a word, that structure is strength. Thank you for showing me how not to crumble. Chloe. I sat back, reading it twice. It's strange, the way gratitude can hit harder than revenge ever could. For years, I thought my legacy would be defined by the empire I burned down. But maybe it was by the people who watched me do it and learned how to build something better. The next morning I replied, Chloe, I remember you. You asked the right questions, even when you didn't know the answers.
Keep building things that last.
And always read the fine print.
Dana.
After sending it, I walked over to the window of my office. The city below shimmered with the quiet hum of 100 other stories, people fighting to be seen, to be valued, to be heard. I realized something then. Revenge is temporary. But example, that's eternal. My story wasn't just about payback anymore. It was a blueprint, proof that no matter how loud the noise gets, real strength lives in precision, patience, and a spine that doesn't bend. I smiled, not the kind I used to wear like armor, but the kind that comes from peace. Because somewhere out there, the next Dana Morgan was already taking notes. I used to think legacy meant leaving something behind. But maybe it's about lighting a fuse that guides others forward, not one that burns, but one that glows. It started as a rumor, a whisper in the industry grapevine. Something about a nomination list circulating through the National Corporate Integrity Forum. I ignored it at first. Awards never interested me. They always seemed to go to the loudest speaker in the room, not the one who did the work behind it. But then, one morning, my assistant walked into my office, eyes wide and phone shaking slightly in her hand. "Dana, you should probably see this." There it was, a press release glowing across every business feed. Dana Morgan, Director of Integrity Systems at Stratex Biocore, receives the National Ethics and Compliance Pioneer Award. I blinked, reread it, and actually laughed out loud. The woman once told she was too slow for innovation had just been named the standard for it. I didn't go to the award ceremony to make a statement. I went because I wanted to close a circle. The auditorium was filled with executives, journalists, and those same buzzword kings who once thought paperwork was beneath them. The announcer called my name, and as I walked on stage, 1,000 camera flashes flickered like tiny lightning bolts. I didn't wear designer couture. Just a simple black suit, the same kind of thing I used to wear in those long nights buried in compliance logs, back when nobody noticed my name. When they handed me the award, heavy and cold in my hands, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still, grounded. The applause dimmed, and someone in the front row asked, "What does this moment mean to you?" I smiled. "It means I was right to care," I said. "That sometimes doing things the hard way, the right way, pays off. Maybe not immediately, maybe not loudly, but inevitably." There was a silence afterward, the good kind. Not polite, not performative. Just quiet understanding. When I left the stage, I didn't look for cameras or handshakes. I just kept walking. Because true vindication doesn't happen on podiums. It happens in the moments where you realize you never needed anyone to believe in you. You just needed to outlast their ignorance. That night, the award sat on my desk, gleaming faintly in the lamplight. Not as a trophy, but as proof that patience can roar louder than revenge ever could. For years, they overlooked me. Now their silence sounds a lot like applause. It was almost poetic, really. The same company that had once replaced me with a spreadsheet now wanted to hire me as a consultant. The email arrived on a Monday morning, dressed in polite professionalism and subtle desperation. "Ms. Morgan, we at Winslow Industries are in the process of restoring full regulatory function and reputation stability. Your expertise and leadership would be invaluable in guiding our restructuring efforts. We're prepared to meet any rate you propose. Respectfully, Interim CEO, Allison Grant." Allison. I remembered her. One of the few decent souls from my old department. The one who used to sneak me extra coffee during those endless audit weeks. Apparently, after Gregory's quiet retirement, she'd been chosen to salvage the wreckage. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I read the email twice, then leaned back and stared at the skyline outside my office window. How strange. To be wanted again by the very place that once treated you as disposable. By noon, my assistant peeked in. "So, are you going to take it?" I smiled. "Maybe. But not for them, for me." The following week, I walked through the same revolving doors I'd exited 2 years ago with a cardboard box and a severance packet. Now, I entered through the executive lobby. Different badges. Different title. Same woman. Only sharper. The halls smelled the same, burnt espresso and ambition. But the energy was quieter now. The kind of quiet that follows a storm. Allison greeted me personally. She looked exhausted, but determined. "Dana, I'm just glad you're here. The board said you were the only person who could fix this." I smiled gently. "Let's start with honesty then." She nodded. "We lost ourselves chasing speed." I nodded back. "Then, let's find your foundation again." We spent the next few days rebuilding what I once designed, not for revenge, but for redemption. Not theirs, mine. Because standing in that same conference room, explaining the same systems they once dismissed, I realized something profound. Closure isn't revenge. It's walking through the ruins of your past without feeling the need to set another fire. When I left that building again, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had outgrown its walls, its politics, its smallness. But I left behind something stronger than anger, a structure built on the truth they once ignored. Some doors you walk through to escape. Others you walk through to prove they never defined you in the first place. There's a quiet kind of peace that comes after a storm. Not the kind you find in silence, but the kind you earn after you've said everything that needed to be said and nothing more. Months passed since I walked through those glass doors for the last time. The headlines had faded, the awards gathered dust, and the world, as it always does, moved on. But I didn't feel forgotten. Because legacy doesn't need an audience. It just needs impact. Every so often, I'd receive an email from a compliance officer or an analyst I'd never met. Your framework helped us pass our first inspection. I studied your paper on ethics and adaptive systems. It changed how I lead my team. Thank you for proving quiet leadership still matters. They called it the Morgan Model now. A structure of trust, accountability, and integrity built from the same principles I was once ridiculed for. Funny how time reframes everything. What they mocked yesterday, they quote tomorrow. I never responded to Gregory's last message, the one sent from a personal address months after his company dissolved. Just 2 lines. You were right. I should have listened. I didn't need to reply. Some truths don't need confirmation. They just need time to bloom. One evening, I found myself walking by the waterfront near Stratex's new headquarters. The city lights reflected on the water, fractured, beautiful, imperfect, kind of like life itself. A young woman passed by, holding a folder labeled compliance intern, orientation packet. She looked nervous, hopeful. For a moment, I saw myself, 10 years younger, full of questions and coffee, ready to prove something. She caught my eye and smiled. I smiled back. That's when I realized the story wasn't really about revenge at all. It was about resilience. About what happens when you stop fighting for a seat at their table and start building your own. My legacy wasn't the company I brought down, it was the system I built that still stands. The proof that ethics and intelligence can coexist. That kindness can be power. And that silence, when used right, can echo louder than any victory speech. As I walked away, the wind carried the faint hum of a city, alive, evolving, unstoppable. I didn't turn back. Because some endings aren't meant to be watched. They're meant to be lived. They fired a name on a payroll, but what they really unleashed was a principle. And principles, they don't retire. They rise.